And welcome to the Parsec Meeting, September 16th, 2023, on Saturday at the Squirrel Hill Library. We are running a combination virtual Zoom meeting as well as a live meeting, so well attended here and expecting other guests as well. We've got two new ones, Rachel and Megan. Welcome, Rachel and Megan, to the Parsec Meeting. Parsec is a 501c3 nonprofit organization promoting science fiction, fantasy, and horror in literature, media, and music for over 30 years. We haven't been a 501c3 nonprofit for that long, but it has been a long time. Our mission is to promote awareness of the richness of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music, further general education in the sciences and arts, support contributions, both scientific and artistic, to society, and to espouse the enjoyment of speculative fiction as literature, art, and music with others. Our program for today is, our guest is Rick Lewis, a literary agent with Martin Literary Management, representing authors of speculative fiction titles in the adult and the YA categories, including science fiction, fantasy, horror, and magical realism, if there is a difference between magical realism and speculative fiction at all. More information about Rick at forgoodbooks.com and about the agency as martinlit.com, at martinlit.com. And it says here, Rick will explain the mysteries of getting an agent, working with an agent, and what exactly an agent does. But before our program, we always start the meeting with a little bit of Parsec news. All links, usually Scott relies on Jane. I'm going to rely on Karen to copy and paste the URLs over into the chat area. Parsec meetings are always free to attend and open to the public. And our guest is Rick Lewis. As I said, he is a literary agent with Martin Literary Management, representing authors of speculative fiction titles in the adult and YA categories, including science fiction, fantasy, horror, and magical realism. Before joining Martin Literary Management, Rick was editor-in-chief at Uproar Books, where he worked closely with debut authors to edit and launch award-winning science fiction and fantasy novels. You can find more information about Rick at forgoodbooks.com and about the agency at martinlit.com. And I won't talk about the mysteries of getting an agent, working with an agent, or what exactly an agent does, because I know Rick is going to do that. Do you want me to talk about the Martin Literary Management founded in 2003, Rick, or are you going to be happy to do that? Or
I will handle all the boilerplate
and the minutia. Okay, well, without any further hesitation or stopping and filling and waiting for phones to ring, I will say, Rick, we're glad you're here. Thank you for coming. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. It's always fun to get to interact with authors and try to get to as many different kinds of conventions and conferences and Zoom meetings that I can. I would really love to take questions as I go. So anybody, don't hesitate to unmute or hit the space bar or however to get questions out there, because I would rather actually be telling you what you're interested in rather than trying to guess and just do a long presentation here. But like you said, I was a publisher and editor at Uproar Books, which was a wonderful experience, and sadly did not survive COVID. We had the bad timing of expanding from digital to actual print in February 2020, and by April, all the bookstores were closed, and we ate a lot of costs there and limped along for a little while. But I have made the move to being an agent, which is, I think, taking the best parts of being a publisher. I get to read the slush piles and find the diamonds in the rough and discover authors and work with them on fine-tuning their manuscripts through the editing process. And then when it's put together, then I now take it to publishers, pitch it to publishers, and work on those contracts and getting them to do it rather than having to foot the bill for publishing it myself. So I like to think that I got all the best parts of the job and then hand the costly parts on to someone else. So I get, when I'm open for submissions, I get 10 to 20 a day. And that is much more than I could ever possibly hope to get through and read and respond to. But I will say most of them don't take a whole lot of review to understand that they are not quite ready to take to publishers. It's the main job of the agents. Is to be that buffer between the publishers, so they're not getting 10 to 20 a day, but only getting the ones that have already had somebody at least go through and say, this person knows how to write. I think I saw a hand up for a question.
Yeah.
How did you get started? What was the process of your first manuscript that you pitched to a publisher?
Yeah. So I go through Query Manager, which is a website app that really streamlines the process a lot. Authors go to querymanager.com and can find an agent in their subgenre and submit that way. And it really is a process of, okay, I'm going to set aside as many days as I can to just read manuscripts. I take 3 chapters to start with, and if the writing quality is high enough, then I request the full manuscript, and then I read the full manuscript. And if that is good, then I set up an actual Zoom call with the author to make sure that they have the kind of passion and professionalism that is going to help them succeed beyond just having a good book. And if all that's there, then I sign them. And then I put together, then we work together for a good month or two to edit the manuscript, to fine tune it as much as possible. And then I create a 9 to 10 page proposal pitch that goes to the major publishers, from Tor on down, through essentially what I'm looking for is anybody large enough to be able to offer an advance, even if it's a small advance, but that's kind of where the agents makes it worth your while to work with an agent. There's a lot of publishers out there that mostly do straight to digital. And that is what Uproar Books was. So I would never say anything bad about them. They don't have the money up front to offer advances, but they do, most of them do an excellent job and are a wonderful place to end up. But they often take submissions straight from the author, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to give an agent 15% of what you're earning if you're going to a publisher that is digital or that doesn't offer an advance. There are still some advantages, but that is kind of our sweet spot in our process there. I hope that was in line with what you were asking. I'll tell you, the thing that agents and publishers, if you go straight to a publisher, are looking for, number one, obviously, is the manuscript. And if the quality and quality is not there, there's not a lot a publisher or an editor or a publisher or a agent can do at that point. They do go through an editing process, but it needs to already be at a certain level. And it is often worthwhile, if you're getting a lot of rejections, to then find an editor to work with, to fine tune your manuscript, to get it up to the level then where you can find an agent or a publisher. Then I'll say there's a big red flag to always look out for when you're submitting to agents is if they say, I like this, and if you pay me $500, $1,000, $2,000, I will edit it for you and we can get it ready to go. There is a lot of those out there, and all of them are scams. So agents don't get paid by the author ever, and don't ever work with an agent that does that. There are a lot of publishers that you can submit to directly who also work that way, and most of them are scams. There are some hybrid things that are not scams, but they also aren't, they're not deliberate. They are trying their best. So I wouldn't call them scams, but I would in general call them not worth working with. So keep in mind, what you really want is to look out for anybody who wants you to pay for something. So beyond the manuscript, what agents and publishers are looking for is the next thing is professionalism. Do you take writing seriously? Is this something that you are actively trying to learn about and improve on? And are you a member of Parsec or writing circles, or is this a real part of your life? And Adriana, you have a question?
Yes, but maybe I can ask it after you finish talking about what you're talking about now, because it's a different thing. It kind of the presentation moved on a little bit, so I can wait.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, of course.
So yeah, just something that shows that you are really care about being a writer, and it's not a hobby. It is something you want to do at a level where you're at a professional level. The next thing is passion, which overlaps a lot. Do you want this to be not just money making, but are you driven to write? Is this something that you're not just trying to be a hack, essentially? Something that you feel like, oh, I've got some writing talent, I bet I could churn something out, but really have a passion for what you're saying in order to weave in things that are important to you to make it connect with audiences. And then the last, not unimportant, but usually least important, is your reach. Are you active on social media? Do you attend conventions? Do you actually make yourself someone to listen to, someone who's trying to build up an audience? Nobody expects a first-time author to have a social media following in the thousands, but the publishers and agents really do like to see that you want to be out there engaging with fans. It's like my social media, people come to my website, the people I can connect with, and the people who publishers can connect with are authors. And they do buy books, but they're not the readers. Nobody follows a publisher on Twitter or X, whatever, because they really like to buy the books. Those are the authors that are following the publishers. The readers follow the authors. That's who they care about. And so to demonstrate that you really do want to connect with readers and be active on social media or other ways in person is helpful. It's not a deal breaker if that's not your thing, if you're too shy, if you're just not comfortable with it. But it is definitely a point in your favor if that's something you do. So let me get back to that question and any other questions that people have.
Yeah, my question is, so you listed a few things you're looking for, but you didn't mention synopsis or query letters. Is this
Yes.
something that you also find important?
Absolutely.
imagine
Yeah,
so.
and that's where you're going to demonstrate these things, and I'll go through some of how to craft those, because that is how you're first going to introduce yourself, whether it's through Query Manager or directly. You're going to write a query letter. That is going to be your introduction. And if you have, I said the number one thing after the manuscript was professionalism. If you have a good query letter that shows that you have studied how to make a query letter and what agents are looking for, what publishers are looking for, that you are taking this seriously. I get fewer as an agent actually than I did as a publisher. But as a publisher, I got all sorts of one sentence or one paragraph. Hey, I've written the best novel ever. People are going to love it. You'll make $1 million. Here it is. And they attached it. And that is obviously not somebody who is taking what they're doing seriously. That's not a professional way to approach anybody.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned social media. So what if I am not on social media and I just don't like it? Like, and I don't want to be on it. Like, how does that hurt my chances?
In short, it is the least important thing. It is one of those things that is, it might put you over the top against somebody else, or would be an added bonus that would make publishers more comfortable. It is not something that they're going to say, I like this manuscript, but this publisher, this author is not on social media. I just can't do that. So, it's gravy. It's a bonus, and it is helpful, because big publishers can do a lot to sell books. Medium and smaller publishers really lean a lot on authors to be the one out there, going to conventions, doing signings, building up a following of their own. And it is weird to get started. It makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It's to make yourself a face of a brand, for lack of a better word, but to be the one out there selling your own books. It's something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and it's not gonna make somebody say no, but it might if you are if there's, say, a group of editors at a publisher and they're each talking about their favorite ones, and so they've brought 6 or 7 to the table, but they're only going to walk away with 3. It can help put you over the top of somebody else.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So with the implosion of Twitter, like where would you be looking for people to have a presence?
Yeah. Twitter is, I haven't posted to Twitter in months for those reasons, but it is where it is the best platform for authors, I think, still. Now, I might continue to fall and not be, but the next best is TikTok, which is weirder and more awkward. The next best would be Instagram, which is a lot like TikTok, but can be more pictures and videos, and so it's obviously tied into Facebook. So yeah, I would still rank them in that order: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. But they're all valuable, and I would also say pick one. Now you can multi-populate where, like, all right, whatever you put on Instagram, you're automatically posting to Twitter too, but you're not actually going to Twitter. You just have it as an auto feed or whatever. That's worthwhile. But if you try to focus on all of them, you'll spend a whole lot of hours on social media. And it's better to find your audience in one place and build that audience there.
Thank you.
Yeah, Karen?
I have a quick one. I just joined Blue Sky,
Mhm.
and like all the authors that were on Twitter that are on Facebook and on Twitter are moving to Blue Sky. Now you still have to have a code to
Mhm.
get onto Blue Sky, but Blue Sky gives you a code every 3 or 4 days to give away to somebody. So like I have 2 of them and I have nobody to give them to. I keep posting it on my Facebook, But I'm not going to post it on my Twitter because apparently you can get flagged for that on Twitter. So
Yeah, they'll block those.
but Blue Sky is basically Twitter.
Yeah.
But it's better, you know, but a lot of the authors are moving over there now. So that's what I've noticed. So it's a good alternative choice to Twitter if you want to look into that.
I've done Threads and Mastodon. I didn't get anywhere with Mastodon. I like Threads. I'm just not particularly active, and doesn't seem a lot of people are. It seems like a lot of people just reserved a spot there to see if it ever became anything, and it's still. I follow George Takei there. He's very active, but other than that, it's pretty silent, bland, in my experience.
I'm sorry, you're referring to Mastodon or to Blue Sky?
Sorry, I meant Threads. I got on Mastodon and never followed through with it. I got on Threads, and I do check that out and follow George Takei there, and I like it, but I haven't found a lot of audience or other authors, or it doesn't seem to have really become active in the kind of volume that it needs to be.
Well, Takai is on Blue Sky too, so, and he's pretty active there. So yeah, if you need a code, let me know. I have one.
All right. Yeah, I'd appreciate that. I need to get back to it. It is worthwhile to do, but
it's worth looking into. I thought it was just going to be another Mastodon or another Threads or another, and it's not. So.
Yeah. So like I said, professionalism is how well you can present your cover letter and how well you kind of know can introduce yourself in a way that demonstrates that you understand what agents and editors do. And when I say editors, I mean publishers. The people at the publishers that I work with are the acquiring editors. So just there's also freelance editors that help you with their manuscript, but I just want to be clear, when I say editors, I mean the publishing editors. So the next thing is the passion, that you're not looking for mailbox money, but you're willing to do hard work, that you have this is not your first draft. This is, by the time you're taking it to an editor or a publisher, you have taken it through several versions and improved and are continuing to improve, and expect that even after you're get approved by an editor an agent or a publisher, that you're gonna still have even more rounds of editing to go. So the things to make sure you're being professional on a query letter is to know the agent. We know you're submitting it to 5, 10, 15 agents at a time, but still address your query letter by the first name. Mention that you understand what their genres that they represent are. It's because there are people who send to 100 at a time, and you get dear agent, and it's almost always not something that is at all the type of author that you represent, and it's a waste of everybody's time. Adriana?
Yeah, sorry to I hope I don't
No, like I
take
said, I
over with
really
questions.
prefer the questions. So
okay. You mentioned that you expect authors to be ready to edit their work further, either with the acquiring or with editor or the publishing house, but also do you as well do some editing work with the author before you submit to publishers? Are you like an editing agent or
I am.
editorial agent?
And that
sorry.
is something that varies very much by agent. I come out of the publishing world, so I do expect to work with the author and do a thorough editing process, and that's my area and how I approach these things. It's also, I think, how I can kind of set myself apart from other editors. And you will find more of that in speculative fiction. Fantasy and science fiction agents do tend to anticipate editing. If you get into particularly romance, but there are other genres that are much more volume, and those agents are looking for something that is ready to go, and they want to have a much higher volume. And like, there are so many romance novels published every year. You really have to feed that beast when you're a publisher. They have low advances, but they buy a lot. And so agents in romance tend to want something that is ready to go, and they want to get it out the door and sold within a month so that they can do many projects because they're only making a little bit per. And you can find that in speculative fiction, but less so. The advances are not as big as mainstream bestsellers, but they're not as small as romance. And so you kind of have to have that conversation with the agent about whether they edit or not. I just signed Jamie Thomas, who I'd worked with before as a publisher, because her agent was not an editor. She's very good at building relationships with publishers, very good at pitching and presenting, but not good at editing. And I worked with Jamie at Uproar when I signed her book as that editor. And so then she was trying to publish, go through her agent to other publishers, and she wasn't having that kind of relationship with her agent. And so she switched to me because she wanted to have somebody who would take her through the editing process. So, it's what you want. It's what you're comfortable with. It's what the agent specializes in. There's not just one, kind of like psychiatrists. You got to find the one that really matches what you need and your personality and how you communicate, how they communicate. It's not that there is a great way to agent and a great way to work with authors or publishers. It's a relationship thing. So see the query letter.
Question here.
Oh yeah, please.
How do you go about building relationships with publishers?
I do Zoom meetings. The first time I send an acquiring editor a pitch, I lead it off by, I want to introduce myself. This is what I represent. I would really like to talk with you about what you're looking for and excited to see right now. If you can schedule a Zoom call with me in the next week or two, that would be great. We can just, put a face to the name. But I'm also excited to go ahead and put this in front of you. Here's what it is. And so, yeah, I did 2 meetings like that last week. One with Amulet, which is a YA publisher under the Abrams umbrella, and one with TKO, which does comic books, because I do represent graphic novels. And I just regularly have these 20 to 30-minute conversations to get to understand specifically what tropes they're tired of, what tropes they love, what they have had the most success with, and specifically what audience they're building, because it's a lot at every publisher, but especially science fiction and fantasy, of finding a subgenre that you are going to build the biggest audience for, and really stay in your wheelhouse. If you do urban fantasy and vampires and you don't want any big epic, George R.R. Martin type stuff, that is a great way. That's pretty broad, but the publishers really do want to have a niche and differentiate themselves from other publishers and to know where their audience is. And so I try to have one-on-one conversations with editors to really find out what their niche is, and so I can put the best things in front of them, but also so that I can have a conversation with them, so that when my emails come into them, they know who I am. They really read it with a much more friendly eye. So
There's a couple questions in the chat here. Did you get to those?
oh no, sorry, I have the chat.
Yeah, Christopher Hankel has a question, has 3 questions for you.
Yes, Christopher. Are they written, or is he
Yeah,
on the?
They're written in there. I can read
Oh,
them.
okay.
He says, do you accept novellas is the first one.
Mhm.
Is it helpful if the author has won short story awards was number 2, and how many authors do you represent was number 3?
Okay. Do I accept novellas? No, I don't. And that is something to look for on an agent's website or on Query Manager to make sure. I need at least 70,000 words, which is novel length. It's even kind of long for a novel, but just those are the publishers that I've built relationships with. That's where I'm strongest in helping somebody through the editing process. Is it helpful if the author has won short story awards? Yes, very. Anything you can put into a biography that demonstrates that you care about writing. That is kind of a passion point. I've done this. I've run awards. It's it's a great and one of the things that would make me read your submission much quicker than necessarily if I notice. I try to read them as they come in that order, but I do flip through things to see if there's things like somebody has won awards, if they've been represented before, things like that, and I will kind of pull those to the top of the pile, so you can get a much quicker response by putting that kind of thing in there. But more importantly, it shows that this is something that is important to your life, that you do a lot of, that you care about. How many authors do I represent? 8 right now. That's on the low side. I do need some more, but don't really want to represent too many at once, particularly as a genre agent, because, and this does happen even with 8, the best editors, acquiring editors, the best publishers that I can take them to are the same ones. And you can't put 2 manuscripts in front of the same acquiring editor at the same time. So you have to stagger them. So it's kind of self-defeating to take too many on at one time. What speculative short story collections? Does that mean what about speculative short story collections that
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wrote underneath the correction. What about? Yes.
Yeah. I don't represent them. They have a niche, and there are agents, and there are a lot of publishers that do them, but I wouldn't be the right person to have those connections. That can be a tougher thing. If you're not already established as a novelist, it is harder to put a short story collection out. Not impossible, but it's generally, very generally speaking, perhaps shouldn't even speak at all to this, but generally speaking, I would say selling them individually to compilations, to anthologies, would be what I would look at for short stories. And then yeah. Phil says, if I recall correctly, you said that genre books don't pay as high advances as mainstream. What is mainstream really a thing? When I look at Buller's lists, there are romance, thriller, true crime, mystery, other genre books. I don't see literary bestsellers, and that is a great point. I use mainstream very loosely and inaccurately. there, but I do mean making it onto the New York Times bestseller list. You don't see a lot of science fiction and fantasy there. It does, Station 11 and others often pop up there. They call upstream science fiction can make it there. But by mainstream, is it really a thing? No, it's a very loose term of things that are most likely to sell, things that are most likely to be on Oprah or Reese Witherspoon's list, or things that are going to sell at those levels and make the New York Times, is what I mean. I would love to do represent some science fiction that sells at that level. It is not what I am anticipating or what I am saying yes or no based on. That is not what where my expectations are when I get submissions. Christine?
Hi, thanks. So, you're talking about the demonstration of professionalism, and I just wanted to tease that out a little bit. I've definitely gotten feedback from agents in the past where, I may demonstrate, here's where I've been published, here's the awards that I've won, whatever, and explicitly received a message of, okay, but I don't really know these places. I don't, can you show me that you've been published in a higher tier journal or something? And I'm kind of wondering, is that, I mean, that might very well be idiosyncratic, that one agent is feeling a little bit more, I want to not only see publication, but see publication at a certain level. And others may say, okay, look, you've demonstrated that you are in it to win it. Let's talk. And just wondered if you could reflect on the kind of the tiering of accomplishment that may be required.
And I would say that's an agent by agent thing. If an agent is really looking for upmarket genre fiction that is going to be able to pull in advances in the $50,000 or more category, then yeah, they probably are going to put a lot more credence in. Have your short stories been published in very well-selling and magazines that they've heard of, versus somebody who's looking at looking for things that can be published at Tor and Orbit and Amulet, rather than in the kind of upmarket publishers. Me, for example, I would love to see, obviously you would love to see it in the most prominent magazines. That I would still be thrilled with just that you have done a lot, that has actually been published anywhere. And so to me, that would not be a response I would ever have. But it depends on the agent that you are reaching out to and the level of sales that they want and expect their authors to have. So yeah, it depends on the agent.
We have a question.
Yeah.
If you're not done, go ahead, please.
No, please go ahead.
Okay, Rachel.
What is your opinion on MFAs and just establishing professionalism?
What is my opinion on what in establishing professionalism?
MFAs.
MFAs?
Masters of Fine Arts.
Yeah, Masters of Fine Arts.
Oh, MFAs. Gotcha. I like to see it. I haven't, I don't expect it. And to be honest, it's not something that makes much of a difference to me. If I do see it, I am more hopeful going into a manuscript. And like, this person has obviously cares, and it does show the passion and professionalism level, and so I'm more hopeful going into it. But it then comes down to the manuscript, and I can't say I've ever paid attention to, like, all right, am I actually requesting full manuscripts more from people who have advanced degrees or not? The answer is probably yes, but it's not something I've paid attention to closely enough to know that there's a correlation. But it is encouraging.
So it doesn't hurt your chances.
It definitely doesn't hurt. It definitely, I would say, I don't know if help is the right thing, but it's a great sign that makes me more eager and hopeful when I receive those queries.
I have a question. The way you talk, it sounds like you would give advice to someone to start with short stories, develop their storytelling technique or whatever, and then move to novels. I know that in the writing group that we have, a lot of people come in and say, well, I've got these novels. Do you work in short fiction? Well, not so much. I usually write novels. So how would you, if somebody doesn't have a lot of record to show that they've published short fiction, what do you do with that?
It's not a discouragement. And again, it kind of like the MFA thing, if you've got that, then I have a higher expectation that it's going to be high quality on the manuscript. And it is something that I can put in the bio to show to publishers, hey, this person cares, this person is active, they've done a lot of stuff. So it's advantageous. Would I, if I'm not inclined to write short stories, do it specifically to build a resume? I wouldn't go that far. I would say it's helpful. I would say it demonstrates things, and I would also say it's extremely educational and helps you advance your craft. I think that it is hard to write novels as an educational tool and advance that way. So I would encourage you to write short stories just because, whether you have any hope of publishing them or putting them out there or not, just to be writing as much as possible. So there are people who just aren't interested and they just write novels, and I think that's going to be harder to improve your craft that way, but it is not going to necessarily hurt your chances because you don't have it in your bio that you've had short stories published.
There's a couple more questions in the chat. One from Lonnie. Are there any advantages or disadvantages of being a debut author?
Yes, there are actually advantages to being a debut author because there is not if you have published in the past, and it is not set in stone, but it does set expectations for what your next book is going to do. If you published with a small publisher and did small numbers because it was a small publisher, not necessarily because of the quality of the manuscript, that is going to set your reputation, and it's going to be something that's going to kind of be in the back of people's heads, the agents and the acquiring editors, that this is the level that they're on. So not having that can be an advantage to go in with a clean slate. Now, obviously, if what you have published before is you're very happy with the sales on, and that's what you want your next book to do, then it is an extraordinarily great advantage to be able to point to it and say, I've already achieved, I've sold, whether it's 3,000 copies or 10,000 copies or whatever level. If that's what you want your next book to sell and is your benchmark, then taking that to the agent and the publisher and saying, my next one can sell at that same level is a great thing to be able to say. But it is, if it's sold at 10,000 and you really want to sell at 50,000, then sometimes it can be something that is going to be not an anchor, but it would weigh a little bit on you. There's a hand up in the library.
Yeah, Phil says, but surely agents and editors both know that small presses sell fewer copies.
Yes, it's true. And so, yeah, so it's not something that is going to be like, well, obviously this person can't sell more than X copies. But it also does really, it puts you an expectation on your head, fairly or unfairly. And it is harder to take someone from a smaller Parliament House press up to Orbit or Tor than if they were a debut author, fairly or unfairly. And Christopher asked, is there an advantage or disadvantage to living overseas? The short answer is no, other than it might be harder to do in-person events and book signings, but that's not a deal breaker. I and all the other agents at our agency would have no problem with working with authors that are overseas and wouldn't bat an eye at it. Phil says, in a query letter, should we mention our literary models and influences? Yes. That's the kind of thing that shows that you care about your writing, that you are taking an approach to it that is very thoughtful, and that you aren't just writing because you have a cool plot in mind. George R.R. Martin says, plots are cheap, execution is everything. And that is very true. I get a lot of things that are poorly written, but they have cool twists, or you know, like you can see, like, oh, this could be great if it was in somebody else's hands. And that is, you can, like, I see this. I can read a mediocre plot all the way to the end if it's good writing. I can't read mediocre writing to the end, no matter how good the plot is. And so it's mentioning that you care about literary models and who your influences are kind of shows that you understand literature and themes and character arcs and things that are important much more than really cool twist.
We do have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I am a new fiction author, but I've been published as nonfiction for many years. In fact, two of my books together have like 2,800 pages in them between the two. A lot of articles in magazines, technical articles. So I have the experience. My work has been through writers groups for 8 or 10 revisions now.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a promising set of qualifications?
Yes, it is. I'd say before I got into publishing, I was in marketing. Before that, I did TV news for a few years, and it was all writing. And it all helped me improve my writing and my editing. And so, yes, the fact that you have been a writer for a long time and achieved success in something vastly different is highly encouraging, that you understand how to put sentences together, how to communicate, how to get ideas across, even if it's not at all the same kind of writing.
He says that's encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there another question in the library?
Rachel says, what about visual art?
Visual art.
Or other?
I have never considered it. I hadn't had anybody who has written a submission where their bio said, I'm a visual artist and do this, or I've had success, or paintings, or whatever. So I hadn't ever thought of it. I would think that that it at least would be an encouraging sign that art and creative process and understanding the creative process and taking things seriously rather than expecting them to come naturally, and knowing that it's a craft that you have to improve on steadily, would translate. But I can't say I've ever actually come across that. Adriana?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, another question. It's about book series. Do you have an opinion on that? And authors querying you with a series or not, or rather not. What is your
So,
preference?
like subgenres, there are publishers who specialize in series and want it. And there are publishers who do standalones, and that is their audience. And they don't have the expertise, is a little overstated, but that's not what they do, is to set things up in series and to market and to build the audience that way. That's not their wheelhouse. So it's not good or bad. Certainly a lot of series, especially in fantasy and sci-fi, are out there and do very well. Standalones do well. Every so often I hear, oh, the trend now is standalone, or the trend now is duologies instead of trilogies. And I don't ever actually see that other than one particular book has become a really successful thing. And so people say that's going to be the trend. No, there are publishers that do all those different things, and those publishers are going to keep doing what they're good at, even if another publisher has a hit. So you'll find the right publisher for those things.
Sorry, just one quick follow-up question, if I may, regarding the same subject.
Yeah.
So when an author queries you with the first of a series, would you still require this book to be possible to be read as a standalone, nevertheless?
It's kind of helpful because it allows me to submit it to a larger number of publishers, but it is not necessary. I'm happy to take on a trilogy or whatever. I wouldn't say no to a great manuscript either way. It just, hey, it's nice if I can say this works as a standalone, and submit it to people that care more about standalones. But that's not gonna make me say no to anything.
We have another question in the chat from Lonnie.
Do you have a wish list, and is there a better time of year to query? I do have a wish list. If you go to mswishlist.com, it's there. It's actually on forgoodbooks.com too, my website. It's a little broader than it was when I was a publisher, because I do take on more different types of authors than I did when I was trying to publish and have a niche. But yeah, I definitely have a wish list. I like epic, I like big, I like old school. So I would much rather read swords and kingdoms and wizards than vampires and werewolves. But it's and I like the big old school Dune science fiction over some other things. I do techno thrillers. So that's kind of is the opposite direction. Things I avoid. I don't like. I haven't had success with humor. I like science fiction humor. I have not had any success selling it, either as a publisher or an agent. So I avoid it now. The angels and mermaids. It's not my thing. I don't feel like I understand those audiences well enough to work somebody through the editing process. I could make it more what I would like, but am I making it more what the audience of angels and mermaids likes? Probably not, because it's just not something that the books I've read that have been successful have not been ones that I particularly thought were great. They didn't strike my fancy, and that's obviously fine. That's how books are. You got to find an editor who really loves the right subgenre. Otherwise, they just don't understand the audience well enough to help you through the editing process. There's a question up here. You mentioned that you were looking for passion, or that writers who care about writing in the craft, making it into a career. Do you get a lot of queries from aspiring authors who aren't passionate and don't take it seriously? How do you know? Yes, I do. I did more as a publisher than as an agent. I think a lot of people have a better idea that agents are trying to get you up with the larger publishers, and that they are not volume people necessarily. When I was a publisher, I got a lot of authors who had just scribbled something they thought was brilliant and sent in like those just weird emails about, this is going to sell 1 million copies. This is the best thing that's ever been. Here it is. Here's the whole manuscript. You know, I'm going to make you a lot of money. And it's always poorly written. So yes, there's a lot of that out there, and it is a lot of reason why larger publishers only take agented submissions to keep that out of their inbox, because it does flood the inbox. The talked a lot about cover letters as query letters as being important to show your professionalism. And I can walk through what I want in a cover letter, and which most everybody wants in a cover letter. And that is dear, the actual name, not dear agent, which we get a lot of. I would usually say in the first sentence, need your book title, the age of the audience that you're going after, and that's young adult or adult for me, but middle grade, picture book. If there's some specific demographic you're going out, the genre, and the word count. All of that should go right there in the first sentence. And I usually would just say, thank you for the opportunity to submit title, a age, genre novel. So a young adult urban fantasy novel, complete at blank words. Because we do get people who have only written half the novel and want to go ahead and get an agent before they complete it, because they don't know how the industry works, and lots of reasons. But so, complete at whatever is a good thing to say. And then second paragraph is a log line. Log line is a term used more in movies than in books, but it's becoming more popular in books because it's a very effective thing to be able to do. It is a 1-sentence description of the entire book that says it's got your stakes, it's got your world, it's got your protagonist, and it's got your plot. And I know that seems impossible to do in 1 sentence, but you get you're going to be able to say more after that. Don't. Once you get into writing log lines, you'll understand how to get it all across very quickly. And usually I would say to set it as in world, description of your world, comma, the protagonist has to do this in order to avoid that. And that is a log line. and it is very very helpful way to introduce a novel. I can read one. This is for Asperfell. Lost in an otherworldly prison built to hold the darkest of wizards, an aristocrat's sharp-tongued daughter must rescue the true heir to the throne before her kingdom falls into civil war. Well, that's tells me the world. The otherworldly prison built to hold dark wizards. Okay, I've got an idea not only of the place, but like the tone and what the atmosphere is. An aristocrat's sharp-tongued daughter. Okay, I get the archetype there. Must rescue the true heir to the throne. Okay, that's her goal. That's what she has to do. That's the plot. Before the kingdom falls into civil war, those are the stakes. So that doesn't tell you very much about the novel at all, but it does capture a lot about how the novel feels and who the novel is, who, you know, where it falls subgenre wise and subgenre wise and subgenre wise. And then I would do 2 paragraphs describing the book. And I would hit heavily on the character arc and the themes more than the plot. That is going to show that you understand what makes a story connect. It's got to have a cool plot, and you're going to have to describe the plot somewhat in order to tell me what the character arc is. But I care a lot more to know that the main character is learning to trust others, or to overcome the death of their mother, or what it is that the character goes through and what changes about them because of the plot, than to tell me in detail how they defeat the bad guy. And that is, it's how you defeat the bad guy is important to Dave Brown page turners. It's not very important to most things that are not intended to be very quick beach reads, because what connects to people is what the character goes through. And that's not facing the bad guy, that is what's internal to the character. And so when you describe what happens in your book, think of it in terms of character arc and get that across in a paragraph or 2. The next thing I would say is the comps. This is
Quick question.
very, yeah.
If you were doing something seriously derivative or cross genre, how would you put that in a query letter?
Well, depending, but you could put that up top where you're talking about genre. Say this is a genre mash of such and such and such and such, or if it's inspired specifically, kind of derivative of something, I would probably work that into the description to say, you know, this is inspired by this fairy tale or this Shakespearean play or whatever, you know, modernizing this or what, however your inspiration is there. I would probably include that down in the description area.
If we're pitching a very derivative urban fantasy, we shouldn't try to go straight. We shouldn't say we shouldn't only say this is urban fantasy. We have to like specifically talk about how we would change it up.
She said,
I don't know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
You wouldn't talk about just the urban fantasy, but also how they're changing it up in the story that they are providing.
And it may go in your comps if you really are trying to hit the same audience as somebody recent. If it's something that's inspired by a fairy tale, then that's obviously not a comp. But comps are important. There's a lot of misunderstanding about why people want comps. A lot of people want to feel unique, to feel like they're striking new ground, to feel like they're different. and they get annoyed that agents and publishers want to hear what the comparable titles are. But if you can't tell me that there is an audience for your book, it's really hard to sell it. You've got to, if they're, you know, even if your book is breathtakingly unique in its own substance, the people who are going to read it are going to be in some demographic. And what other book has hit that demographic before, even if it's, you don't like to say that your book is like that book in its content. But what we're really want to know from comps is the demographic, and not just in terms of its age, sex, religion, what part of the world they're in, or, you know, what they like, but also that this is a demographic that buys books. So, you know, it is very important to a publisher to know that this is written for people that are going to spend money. And whether you like it to be pure art or not, that's something, and it's going to show professionalism that you're not saying, I have created a masterpiece that stands on its own, but you're saying, I have created a commercial work of art that has sales potential. And then the last thing I would put in your query letter is a bio, no more than one paragraph, and emphasize what shows that you are a writer. You can put in what your day job is or anything else, whether you have children and all that kind of stuff if you want. But that is not what my eye is going to in your bio. That what I'm going to in your bio is, are you part of a Parsec or a writing circle, or have you written short stories, or have you been writing short stories since you were 10 years old, or novels since you were 10 years old, or what about your life tells me that a writer is how you identify yourself? And that's the query letter in a nutshell. Beyond that, probably going to send in, for me, it's always the first 3 chapters, but different agents have different guidelines on what they want to accompany your query letter to get a sense of your writing. And that's what I have found is the most succinct query letter. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. I have a question about the comps and the demographics. So why was Harry Potter and A Wrinkle in Time such hard sells? Because they were such great books. Is that because they didn't have a comp and there wasn't a demographic to sell to?
Yeah, you know, everything is a hard sell. It's a very competitive industry. So why did the Harry Potter one? I've seen a meme out there that I really like. That is, person outside the industry. Wow, it took 13 publishers before somebody accepted Harry Potter. Somebody inside the industry. Whoa, it only took 13 publishers for somebody to find Harry Potter. You know, I on the Harry Potter example, I think the first chapter of Harry Potter is terrible. I love Harry Potter, but the first chapter is terrible. And I put, she got rejected a lot just because it is entirely Dumbledore sitting around talking to McGonagall outside the Dursleys' house. And it's not an interesting first chapter. It's not compelling. It doesn't introduce you to any of the things that you want to be introduced to in a children's book in the first chapter. And it takes somebody who actually reads longer than that to realize, oh my gosh, wow, she has created this most engrossing world and this endearing characters and blah. And that, so Harry Potter is kind of a unique thing. It really did take somebody diving into it to get it. But why does the things get passed on even though they're great? Because there are so many submissions and you're reading them so back to back that a great book can strike you as not great on the wrong day. It is a hard thing to distinguish yourself, and you don't find a lot of debut novels that got picked up by the first publisher, because it's just, one, it's subjective. You know, there are people who hate all sorts of popular literature and will not hesitate to tell you how much they hated this beloved book or beloved movie or whatever. But also it's you can get kind of blinded to things as you go through submissions, and they don't stand out the way they should. So it's tough. I see a couple of questions up here. Let me get back to where we were. Do you ever want an author to change something and the author gives reason for keeping it? And what fraction of the time does it get changed? Yes, I recommend, when I send my edits to somebody, I say, these are recommendations. This is not me rewriting your book. These are my recommendations. Hit accept, hit reject, or if you get the idea but you don't like what I'm saying, you know, take another stab at it yourself, that kind of thing. And yeah, a lot of that, I would rather put my thought out there for them to say no to than to be uncomfortable with a paragraph or something and not say anything because I don't, you know. So you definitely need to find an editor, whether it's on the agent level or wherever, that you are comfortable saying no to, but getting ideas from and working together with. And I would say just outright no and staying with what they originally did happens very little, probably less than 10% of what I send to somebody. They don't. They're just like, yeah, no, that what I've written is perfect and you're wrong. Usually, the most common thing is for them to say, I get what you mean there. I can do better at that. And they do it. But, you know, there's plenty of times where they're just like, oh, yeah, you nailed what I was trying to say. And they just accept what I have sent back to them. But it is important to have a level of comfort where neither one of you feel hesitant to bring something up, and the other one is not hesitant to say, no, I don't think that's quite right. It's so I know I'm trying to help an author better achieve their vision and not craft a book around me. So I try to make sure that I'm always couching things in here's what I would do and why, but feel free to say no. See, there is lots of query letter advice that suggests putting the logline first. Is that detrimental either way? No, it's not. 90% of the letters I get have the logline first. Dear Rick, logline. That's fine. I like to see the title and know what kind of genre it is before I read the logline, just to get my head prepared for just to know that it's a YA fantasy before I read the logline. That's my personal preference. It is entirely a personal preference, and no reason you shouldn't do it the other way if it reads better to you, and there's probably agents that like it better that way. Most of mine do. Do you think readers care as much about character in hard sci-fi? The best-selling sci-fi books I can think of, say Peter Watts novels, emphasize tech over characters. After you sold one book by an author, would you then want to consult with them on the next novel while they're writing it? Okay, so does character matter as much in hard sci-fi? I personally would say yes, but I could be wrong. I think that even in novels where the tech is very much like, isn't this a cool world? Isn't this amazing how all this is, the technology is advanced, where it is taking society? I think really for it to be good, it has to, the main character can't just be looking around and all of that. It has to have impacted who the character is in some way, whether it's made them jaded, which is my least favorite kind of character, or made them detached, which can then come off as, isn't the technology the main point, but the point is the dehumanization. So, you know, I can point to books where that have done well where the main character was not particularly strong. So yeah, that does break out and do well sometimes. But I still would be hesitant to say that it's a good thing for the main character to ever take a backseat to the magic system or the technology or your world building. After you've sold one book, would you want to consult with them on the next? Would I want to? Yeah. I wouldn't ever want to be in a position where I'm saying, hey, look, here's a good trend. Why don't you write around this? That's not ever going to create a very immersive experience when reading a book if the person is taking orders. So, but would, and I do have authors say, listen, I've got a couple of ideas in my head. I'm not sure which one to pursue. And they describe them to me and I give them my reaction to this and that and what would need to change on this or why this, I think, really has great potential. And that often will help them pick what their next book is going to be. And then, so on that level, yes, I don't read things that are half written or get involved once they've picked their concept and done the outline. And I'm happy to talk with them about themes and ideas on character arcs, things like that, in vague sense about that, or caution them against things that I think are people are kind of tired of as they're coming up with a concept. But once they really get into their first draft, I'm not going to want to help them or get into it until that draft is done and I can give them feedback as a whole. I'm not going to try and co-author or get into that kind of thing. But yes, I do love to talk through concepts and themes. Are concerns about sales make it better to use more recent comp title? Yes, the more recent, the better. If you say that your comp is Dune, that does help in terms of telling me what the writing and the audience is going to be like. There's no chance that that is the comp I would use when I'm taking it to the publisher. It's too vague. It's too old. I'm going to find something. Ancillary Justice is probably a little old. Really, you want something in the last 3 or 4 years to take to publishers. But that's different than necessarily what you want to show the agent. It's great if you want to show the agent. It's very helpful to me if your comps are more recent. But also, if they're more recent, there's more of a chance that I haven't read it. And it doesn't mean as much to me. So it's good in one way and bad in another. It doesn't help me necessarily, but then it's more likely that I can do my research, and when I'm looking at comps, I'm like, oh yeah, you nailed it. And I can actually put that in the pitch to the publisher. So, so yes, recent comps are great, but don't worry too much about finding it the most recent comp, because you really want it to be, when you're talking to an agent at least, something that they're familiar with and gives them the right context. Do you always read chapters submitted to you in a query package, or do you ever reject things on a query letter alone? When I was a publisher, yes, I would delete things on the query. I can't think of the time I've done that as an agent through Query Manager. One, Query Manager requires a lot of things that you are filling out a form. And so it's really hard to do a very incomplete, unserious letter. Not impossible, but people who find Query Manager are more likely to be the kinds of people that are actually paying attention and not just Googling what publishers are accepting from unagented writers. But two, they're going to have to fill out so much of this that they're either going to get turned off by the process, or they're somebody who already has all this in mind and knows how to write a query letter. So I don't get that much anymore. And I don't think, I have definitely come to a query letter and thought, oh my gosh, this is not going to be good. But I think I have always still opened it as an agent in Query Manager, even if it has only taken me a few paragraphs to be like, yep, I was right, this is awful. I don't think I have just said the query letter is so bad that I'm not even going to open it. But maybe I have. Maybe I just don't remember it. But I certainly have been turned off and then not given a book a very long look, because I have an expectation that it's going to be bad, and that is generally fulfilled very quickly. To what sorry, I tried to move this and the comments jumped around on me, so I lost where I was. To what extent should YA fantasy contain romantic elements? It is what audiences expect and what the bulk of audiences want to read. So it is typically what you would anticipate being there. If it is not in your heart to do that, and you have an idea that makes a fully rounded character where that is not part of it, follow your heart and write that and try and sell that, rather than include a romantic element that you don't care about. But it is going to make publishers wonder if they're going to have a hard time selling it to the audience through the channels that they normally go through. They know where to advertise, what to put in their advertisements, what language to use, they have a set model for how to reach an audience. And if your manuscript doesn't go to that audience, they're not necessarily going to take a chance on trying to find a brand new audience other than the one that they know how to reach. And so it's going to mean that you have fewer publishers that are likely to give it an in-depth look. But that is not the end-all be-all. Even if it only has a smaller number of publishers that might publish it, if it's your book, go to those publishers, try to sell it to those publishers, rather than trying to conform. As long as it's a well-written book and it's not so idiosyncratic that it's unenjoyable, don't include elements that you don't care about. So YA fantasy doesn't have to have romance, but the audiences are the established audiences for the ones that do are there, and publishers are going to feel like they reach them easier. So it is an advantage to them to stick with what they know. There's a question in the library.
Yeah.
Yes.
You said you had a minimum of 70,000 words that you would consider. Is there an upper bound of what you think is reasonable?
Well, yeah, if it certainly depends on subgenre. If you have a YA book that's 14 or 140,000 words, you're going to have a hard time finding a publisher, and I would approach that book wondering whether you wanted to split that into two 70,000 word books, or you wanted to really figure out which subplots could go and bring that down to 110,000, because that's really about the ceiling you're going to find in YA. It's in part is because the audiences want books that are in that level, but it's also in part because it's more expensive to produce a book with more pages, and it eats into profit margins. And if I've got two books that I love, and one of them is 100,000 pages and one of them is 140,000 pages, I'm going to go with the 100,000 pages because I can make more money on it. There's another question. Yep.
If we're leaning on specific knowledge for our book, that's like goes into a specific art form, would that count as a potential audience of people who are also into that art form, or should not even bother on the commercial level with that sort of thing?
Yeah, I would definitely put that in there. I'd put that both in as I'm an expert and can really describe this accurately, and it's important to me and I'm passionate about it, and this is going to come from a place of honesty, both in terms of accuracy and in terms of personal connection. And also, I would say it's going to appeal to people who love ballet, or people who love, this realist painting, whatever it is. It's and I've written some things like that, and what I would usually, how I would kind of phrase it is, this is going to appeal to readers who love ballet, but it's also the author's enthusiasm is so infectious that it's going to capture the imaginations of people who know nothing about ballet. Because I've found infectious enthusiasm is actually a really good selling point. If the author cares about something, you get drawn into their energy, you get drawn into their passion, even if you don't care about it at all. An example would be Ready Player One. There are lots of people who love 80s nostalgia, who love that part of Ready Player One. There are a lot of people who don't care about 80s nostalgia, but in the context of the book, the character and the author's clear just enthusiasm for all of it really is infectious. You get swept up in it, and it matters to you over the course of the book, even if it's something that it does not matter to you in real life at all. So yes, definitely put that in there, both in terms of the accuracy and the passion.
She says that really helps.
Yeah.
At what point should I, as an author, take a rejection as an indication that my manuscript? Sorry, again, I tried to scroll down, and what it does is it goes all the way to the bottom rather than just going down a little bit.
I can read it for you, Rick. That'll help.
Yeah.
At
Thank
what
you.
point, yeah, this one's from Jessica. At what point should I, as an author, take rejection as an indication that my manuscript doesn't have legs, i.e., after how many rejections, like 30 or 50? At what point should I reasonably call it a day and move on to the next project?
That is a tough question, because there are a lot of manuscripts that are very far off and just not publishable anywhere close to as they are written now, versus this I see potential to, but is not ready. And the language that you get back from editors that I would send back is very much the same. And it's not easy to tell whether you've got 30 rejections because you've got a promising thing that needs another round, or you've just got something that you just need to move on from. And I think that gets so tough because even in writing circles and things like that, you don't want to tell somebody this is crap and, ruin their excitement for being an author or turn them off from it. You want to be encouraging and coaching. And so it really is hard to get anybody to tell you when something just isn't viable. There are hints. If you get someone who says something other than this isn't right for me, but actually tells you, oh, you know what, I just didn't think the main character had enough depth or something like that, that is specific to your manuscript, that is a good sign that you have something that has good potential and you should keep working on. If you get 30 form letters in a row, maybe it's not. I can't say for sure it's not, but it is. You're not going to ever get a rejection that, I'm sorry, this has no hope. Thank you for sending it anyway. It's always going to be, I'm not the right person to represent this, is the standard phrase. Or I didn't fall in love with this the way I need to, is a very popular phrase these days. But it is very much the standard rejection, and it could mean close, it could mean far off, and people don't want to say anything too negative because that often leads authors to argue with you, and then it's just not helpful on either side. No agent has time to give you a 3-page critique on what works and what doesn't work on your novel. You can pay people to do that, and there are people it's worth paying to do that, but it's hard to know. I don't have any that I know offhand that I would say, oh, this person is worth the $300 that they, and I stay away from that because I don't want to ever come off as an agent that is trying to sell something to authors. So I have never tried to figure out who I would recommend in such circumstances, but I can tell you that it can be worthwhile if you are worried about a manuscript that's gotten a bunch of rejections to get somebody who you can get to give an honest critique, who, even if you have to pay a little bit of money, and even then, I don't know that I'd recommend paying somebody, but to try and find somebody who is knowledgeable and that you go into it saying, look, if this is crap, tell me it's crap. I will move on. It's not going to break my heart. I'm not going to give up writing forever. I just want to know if this is worth, putting 3 more rounds of editing, which is going to be several months of my life into, or if I shouldn't. And it's really hard, if not impossible, to know from agent responses if that's the case or not, even if that would be helpful.
Do you still have time for a couple more questions? It's almost
Absolutely.
4 o'clock. I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yep.
Jessica also asks, how many reputable agents are there out there for any given manuscript? Like the idea of even querying 5 agents, is that a crazy idea because there just aren't that many?
Oh, there are a lot of agents.
50 agents,
and
not 5.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, she said in her question, like the idea of querying 50 agents.
50 agents, yeah. Probably before I got to 50, I would think that maybe I might need to redo the manuscript another round, but maybe not. I would generally recommend going to about 5 at a time, 3 to 5, and getting your response, so that once you get to 15 negatives, if you are getting nothing but standard responses, that you haven't really gone to all 50 editors that, or agents that you really want to work with, and gotten a rejection, because it's hard to get somebody to look at something twice. So, I would stagger to start with, and then I would keep an eye on those responses. And if you're getting personalized responses, then you might keep going, even if you get to 30, 40, 50. But if you're getting, thank you, this isn't for me, I didn't fall in love with it, each time, and 15 to 20, you should probably look at whether you want to go back to the editing stage and create a newer, stronger draft.
So Phil is tacking onto that, and he says, Rick, 5 at a time, you recommend simultaneous submissions?
Yes, definitely simultaneous. There are a handful of agents that don't allow that, but not many. If somebody doesn't allow simultaneous submissions and isn't a huge name author, doesn't represent huge name authors, I probably wouldn't bother with them. There's something weird about how, whether they have an ego or whether they are, trying to, that would be a red flag to me. I expect when somebody submits to me that I am in the mix. When you get an offer from an agent, they anticipate that it is out with other people, and what they anticipate you will say back to them is, thank you so much, it's out with a few other authors, please give me a couple of weeks to find out if there's any other interest, and to research you and into, blah, blah, blah. They don't expect a yes or no answer in the response. They expect you to ask for 2 or 3 weeks. And if they, for some reason, are not willing to do that, that's potentially a red flag. Not necessarily a deal breaker, but it's it is a weird pressure technique to put onto somebody, and it's not something I would ever do. I expect people to say that they need a few weeks to look it over and think about it. And I all the time get, hey, I just got an offer on this thing that I sent you a month ago. Have you had a chance to look at it yet? And I very much appreciate that. I do then put those at the top of the list to get back on. So yes, definitely submit to multiple at a time, but not your entire spreadsheet at a time.
Rick says, I did not know that. Thanks. Oh, there's one more question here. It's from Joyce. She says, any concern in the industry with AI written submissions?
Yes, lots, tons. If you do use AI as part of your process, definitely put that in the material up front before they get into the manuscript, because 99% of people will say no at that point, and they will not appreciate going through an entire manuscript only to find out on the back end that it's not something that they would touch. I actually last week got a submission that is about AI, and so for that reason, the author used AI as part of the process. And that is intriguing, and I'm not exactly sure what to do that. I would never take anything written by AI. But because it's thematically important to what he is saying, it is interesting that he deliberately, for that reason, ran his ideas through AI and got the AI's feedback on it and tried to work some of that into the AI character and what the book was about. And so, yeah, I can tell you that most agents and every large publisher would outright say no to anything that has in part been written by AI, and definitely all been written by AI. But that if there is a reason that you're incorporating AI, you might it's gonna narrow your window for sure. But it's interesting, and you might be able to justify it.
Yeah, Christine wants to know when you're going to be open to submissions again.
Great question. I will take submissions from this group. It's going to be a while before I am open to submissions again, because I have literally hundreds. And even if I got through them 5 a day, which I rarely can do, it would take me months to get back above water. But when I do events about every other month, and I always say to the people there, you can submit to me because I know you are actively involved in groups like this where writing is important to you, and these kind of submissions are always higher quality than the general ones. So I don't want to close myself off to higher quality submissions. And to submit to me, go directly through email. And I will put my email address in the chat, but it's just rick@martinlit.com. Send me a query letter, send me the first 3 chapters. Anything else you want to say, great. It doesn't have to limit your query letter to the concise thing that I said, especially because if I was doing this through Query Manager, I would have a lot more separate things like, have you been represented before, and just some yes or no questions that you would fill out in this form. So err on the side of more information. If you've got it, great. You go ahead and tell me what you've got. But I am definitely happy to take a look at targeted groups and encourage you to, if you're interested. Is there a time limit on this offer? No. You've got my email address. So if your book is not ready to go right now, but in 3 months is, I'll know Parsec to say, hey, I'm from Parsec, happy to that you shared your email address, and here it is finally. So I know I'll definitely, it still takes me a month or more to get 2 things, but they go higher in the pile. They don't go on the bottom of the pile. So yes, glad to do that. Are there any other questions?
I expect there will always be other questions, but it is 4 o'clock, and I think that's I don't know, Karen. I don't have the stuff up here saying how long it's supposed to go, and I don't want to presume on your good nature.
I think it was supposed to end at 3:30, but Rick was having so much fun, we let him go.
I know, yeah.
Hey, if nobody's
I love talking
complaining,
to authors. It's a reason I do this for a living. It's a passion. It's so much fun. So
right, and if nobody's complaining, I'm not going to stop you.
So I would say I'm going to presume on your good nature then, and say 1 or 2 more questions, and then I think we need to wrap it up.
sounds good.
It looks like you covered everything, right?
Everything.
You got it all. You got it all.
In an hour and a half.
Wait,
Wait,
I have one.
Jessica has one.
Yep, just
Yeah.
What is the most exciting submission I've received recently? That's a good question. Well, I got a submission from a TV producer from a show that I really loved. So that was kind of fun. I don't know if anybody's watched Dark Matter. It was a sci-fi show that lasted 3 seasons. It got canceled on a cliffhanger. But Joseph Malozzi was the co-creator of that and wrote most of the episodes. And he has a graphic novel that he needs an agent for. And so I'm going to be working with him. So that was really exciting just because I had actually knew his past work. But I do get very giddy almost about really anything that I say yes to. That's what you need to have that reaction to accept something. That wow, I'm giddy about this. I can't wait to talk to the author. I can't wait to type up all my thoughts on the themes and work on it. Like, just it's going to be something I'm going to be thinking about for the next 3 weeks anyway, because I'm really just jazzed about how this story. And that's what I'm looking for. And I'll say, even though most, the vast majority of submissions are no's, I open every one of them excited and hopeful. I want to say yes. I want to get that kind of giddy, and I do. And that's the ones I say yes to. There are a whole lot of them that are good, but not for me. And I do try to add additional sentences to my form letter rejection to all of those to say, look, I really love this, but for this reason, it's not for me. To all of those, so that I am giving that kind of encouraging feedback rather than stock feedback to help you distinguish whether. I don't always have time to do that. There are times where I simply have to send the stock feedback, but I do try to do that. So at what point does no answer from an agent mean no? That is very individual to an agent. And I got into publishing, and then when I switched to agenting, both times telling myself, I'm going to say no. People deserve to say no. And they should expect to hear a lot of no's. It's just the nature of the business, and I'm not going to be soft-hearted in that way. I'm going to get back to people. But it is hard to say no. It is not is something that you really quickly get comfortable with, or I've never really gotten comfortable with it. I hate to do it every time. So I do, and this is a common thing. There's something agents call the sea of maybe. It is all of those things that you weren't so excited about, that you said yes to as soon as you read it, but you weren't so that you liked enough that you couldn't bring yourself to say no to. And so it sits there and floats around in the sea of maybe for a long time until you finally are just like, I've strung this out for so long enough. If I haven't come back to it and said yes, then I need to admit that it's a no, even though I hate to say no. So sometimes a long wait can be a positive sign that you've kind of fallen into this sea where they hated to say no to you. But also that long wait can, and I hate to admit, with me, it can just be, I have so many submissions, and for whatever reason, you haven't made it to the top of the list, because when I have a lot of submissions, sometimes I'm in the mood to read fantasy, sometimes I'm in the mood to read science fiction. So I sort my lists that way. And the thing that, for me, I accept horror, but it's rarely the thing that I'm most excited to read. It's not what I read a lot of for fun, unless I get something that's highly recommended to me. So unless I'm having a day where I'm literally doing things in order without sorting at all, the horror ones tend to fall to the bottom of my list. And so they have a lot longer response time than the others. And it's not anything about the manuscript other than I have a big list, and it's hard to say. So, some people get a response in weeks and some people get a response in months. And it's, at what point does no answer mean no? I can't give you a firm answer, but I can tell you, if it's been more than 3 months, go ahead and start going to the next batch on your list. 3 months, you're probably don't necessarily give up and strike them off the no list, but definitely take them out of your immediate thoughts and move on as if you've gotten a no, even if you're holding on to some hope.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
I would say that that is a good note to go out on, and we appreciate you being here. I don't know if any of the Parsec members have any quick announcements or things they would like to mention or bring up. You're welcome to stay on while that gets done, or we thank you for your time and your information and your willingness to work with us. And
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
being
much.
here,
It's lovely
Rick.
being
That was,
here,
it was
yeah.
wonderful. Thank you.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you.